When did you first experience the call to the priesthood, and how did that call change over time?
When I first considered a call to the priesthood, I was in high school, and it wasn't something that was constantly on my mind, but every so often people would come to me and suggest that I should look into the priesthood, and I kind of just ignored them. So it was there somewhere in the background of my mind in high school, especially junior and senior year. During my time in seminary, I've really just had the opportunity to dive in and grow in my relationship with the Lord. And as I grew in my identity as His beloved Son and He as my loving Father, I've also seen my call to the priesthood change and mature and become more real and more personal.
I first started listening to the voice of God calling me to the priesthood in my early 20s. I joined seminary because I thought God wanted me to do it. And so initially it was an act of trusting God to fulfill all my desires. But then as seminary went on, what I realized is that I was in seminary for Him and not for myself. And so what changed was now there was this conformity of will to not just trusting God, but wanting priesthood for myself as well. So God wanted it, showed me that He wanted it for me. And then I changed over time. I started to trust Him more and more to the point where now I actually myself desire priesthood.
What I've come to realize is that desire was always in my heart, like that desire to be a priest. But it was just through the circumstances, just through the influences of going through high school and whatnot, they would be diminished, or perhaps I would feel it again when I would go through prayer. And so the experience was always the Lord asking me just to respond to that desire that He's placed on my heart. There was just an increasing joy as I continued allowing myself to just kind of chase that desire that the Lord has placed there.
I know for me personally, it always came to the Eucharist and taking that time to serve most Sundays and seeing the priest lift the host up into the air. I just grew to really love the Eucharist. And the more I would talk about it with my friends, the more I would share how much my faith meant to me and how much the Eucharist meant to me, the more I felt that call to share it for the rest of my life, and especially in the form of the priesthood. And so kind of as high school went along and as I would talk more and more with my friends, that desire for the priesthood eventually grew and grew.
What is something you wish someone had told you when you were in that initial phase of discernment?
So one of the few things that I wish someone would tell me back when I was exploring the idea of priesthood and seminary is that the time that you'll spend in seminary is totally worth the investment of the church. That money is not a thing that should be an object to your discernment and to being able to explore where the Lord is calling you in your life. And that any amount of time you spend in a seminary is not a waste, but rather it helps form you into a better man and into the person that Jesus wants you to be, whether that's a spiritual father or a biological one.
My big hang-up early on in seminary was this desire for marriage and desire for fatherhood, and feeling like, well, I have to give it up. I have to give it all up if I go and become a priest. And so that was really hard for me to have to go between the two. Okay, it's either this or it's that. And something that I was told by actually Father Brett Brannon, who wrote To Save 1,000 Souls, he said, a man who does not desire marriage, a man who does not desire fatherhood, is not a candidate for priesthood. And for me, that was just one of those moments where it's oh, here I am thinking well, maybe I'm supposed to leave because I really want to get married, I really want to have kids. And he's like, you have to want that to become a priest. So there was just this type of tension that kind of got taken off my shoulders from that. And I would say that's something I wish I knew right away.
Before reaching out to the diocese, how did you get information about priesthood?
Yeah, of course, just the internet. You're like, you have a random question and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna like look it up. But I will say there were a couple of seminarians that did I crossed paths with during my time in at the parish and whatnot. And so sometimes I knew they would give like a little vocation talk or whatnot. Mm-hmm. So I find myself just kind of on the website, kind of like scrolling through, looking. They have priest hero talks, and I would look at their like priest hero talks.
One of the big things was reaching out to the pastor at my home parish. He was a big supporter of vocations, and when I asked him about the process, he was more than willing to give the information that I needed and just kind of offer me advice where it was needed.
And what originally led you to reaching out to the vocation director?
Yeah, actually, I didn't reach out to the vocation director on my own. I was with a priest, and I had been doing a Bible study with him, and he said to me, hey, you told me that you're interested in becoming a priest now, or you feel that God's calling you to this. He said, the vocation director is coming to our parish here, and he's doing Mass. Do you want me to arrange a meeting with him right after Mass so we could talk to him one-on-one? And I was kind of like, okay, sure. So I kind of agreed reluctantly, but yeah, that was it. He just everything kind of just folded together. Everything got kind of placed in my lap.
I did a seminary visit my sophomore year, and the experience of actually concretely seeing a seminary, not just perhaps imagining it, really kind of gave me it really ignited that desire to be a priest. And so I concretely then just became really serious about my discernment, such that by the time I got to about my junior year, kind of endish, I was kind of getting that, what am I going to do with my life, kind of existential crisis. And I kind of said, okay, Lord, I'll give you at least a year. And so I reached out, I told my parish priest, helped me reach out, gave me contact info, and the rest is just kind of history.
And what did you experience when you took those initial steps to actually say yes to this invitation from God?
After contacting the vocations director and meeting with him, I was a little uncertain. I wasn't sure, all right, is this what God wants me to do? Am I actually doing this right now? I just kept up what I was already doing before I even talked to the vocations director, and namely just spending some time with Jesus in the Adoration Chapel. I literally took the thick application document with me to the Adoration Chapel, and I was like, all right, Jesus, if you want me to do this, you're going to help me make this possible. And so I just was able to rely on my family also and their support in that whole process of slowly applying and interviewing and just beginning the first steps towards entrance into seminary.
There's a great freeing experience of just kind of taking that next step and making that big leap, especially with as long as I had kind of sat on the fence. There was something really joyful about going closer and taking the next big move. There was definitely a lot of fear too. I remember still being kind of worried, like, what were going to be the reactions of the people around me? What if I didn't end up making it? Or I was a lot of uncertainty just about what was coming in my life. But I think it was both that excitement and that fear kind of hit both at once. But I think the excitement was definitely greater.
For my life, there was definitely a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning very early on. And yet that was clouded by fear and worry for a number of reasons, worrying about, how am I going to tell my parents? How am I going to tell my friends? How am I going to tell my siblings? But right away there was that sense of purpose and meaning of like, wow, there's a direction. There's a direction in my life.
I would say the experience was there was this profound peace, but also there was kind of like the evil one, also kind of profound fear. It's kind of like both. In the initial moment, there was the peace of almost kind of having made a great decision and kind of like the Lord's delight in me. But as the time got a little closer to actually going into seminary, there's just this profound fear that I wouldn't be enough, and I wouldn't measure up. And so there was just kind of like both of those in tension, and it was just kind of like a very beautiful moment, just to sit in prayer and just kind of see what the Lord had to say about those fears and those places of kind of insecurity.
What was the response of your friends and family when you shared with them that you were applying for seminary?
My mom was, I was predicted correctly. She was very excited. What I did not predict was I thought I was going to meet a lot of resistance. A lot of people would be mad at me. For some reason, I thought I was going to lose a lot of my relationships. And really, I had, most people were a little bit confused, like, oh, caught off guard. But I really received a lot of support where I thought I wouldn't have.
With my family, it was a bit of a mixed bag. They were definitely uncertain to begin with. On one hand, like, they could tell I really desired it. On the other hand, they were parents, and like, they would get concerned about what came next, and it was a new area for them. My family, we really hadn't known too many people who'd gone through the discernment process or begun to study to be priests. So I think there was a lot of nervousness, but on the other hand, like, they were willing to trust me in this and willing to take those steps with me.
Some people were really shocked, and other people were like, oh, we saw this coming like a mile away. Some of my friends, they were a little unsure or confused or uncertain as to where this will all end up, especially as I was already looking at various colleges. But the majority of them were very supportive of my decision.
What was your biggest worry when you were discerning the priesthood?
Personally, my biggest worry was, I was like, if I enter seminary and let's say it just doesn't pan out, let's say I just enter and, not what do I do? Because as a seminarian, you're starting to get a philosophy degree initially. What can I do at a philosophy degree? It's like, is it just gonna like set me back? And so part of the initial stage was kind of learning to let that worry go away, because it was kind of hindering my ability to even discern well, because you can't discern out of a place of fear. It's got to be out of a place of love.
As a high schooler, I felt like, it's very important. I'm going off to college. I need to know what I'm going to study. That way I can know what job I'm going to take. That way I can figure out the next several decades. Which, looking back in retrospect, like, I find it kind of funny, but I would say, especially in that initial first couple moments, that was a big worry for me, was not knowing what lay ahead.
As I spent more time in the seminary and diving into the formation there, the question of, am I worthy? Am I worthy of such a call to serve the Lord as his priest? And being able to spend that time in the seminary with my other brothers who were struggling with those same things was definitely a comfort and helped me to pursue the Lord's constant calling.
My biggest worry, of course, was academics. I was worried about, can I keep up with the academic rigor of seminary, and can I keep up, or is this going to be an embarrassing moment for me when I go in and I can't keep up and I have to leave? I would say the other thing, there was still this desire for marriage, and so when I was going in, I was like, am I really going to give up this thing that I desire so much? So I was still clinging on to that a lot.
Did you ever have a girlfriend or a crush? And how did the Lord work through that for you?
Of course I did. So before seminary, there was, there would be dating, but nothing serious. And actually the longest serious relationship I had was 1 month long, and I was in Mexico, and I knew her for 1 month because I had to leave Mexico. So that's why the relationship ended. When I look back on that, what I think God was trying to do is, he's trying to reveal to me that my heart is a heart that loves, and this girl, I really loved her, but it was cut off because she was there and I had to go back. And not too long after that, God started pulling on my heart towards seminary.
There was a point around, it's either my sophomore or my junior year of high school, where I had been seeing a girl for a couple months at this point, and eventually she just asked me, she's like, so am I your girlfriend? And it kind of forced me to think about it. I ended up praying with it that night and just realizing that, especially as I'd been feeling more and more drawn to the priesthood, for me at that point it didn't feel fair to kind of keep leading her on like this. So I ended up telling her the next day, I'm like, I'm discerning the priesthood, and I think that's where God's leading me. And pretty much after that, I stopped going on dates, obviously.
Did you have any of your fellow seminarians at any point in time discern out? If they did, what was that like for you when they left seminary?
Yeah, for me there's this initial sense of disappointment. But the disappointment's not really like, I'm disappointed in you for leaving. The disappointment's like, I'm disappointed that this person won't be in the community anymore. And so I guess I'm just gonna miss that person. That's my disappointment. I would say for myself though, usually that is pretty quickly transferred into kind of a joyful experience because, living in community with these guys, living in a community of prayer, if a guy leaves seminary, there's a sense that, well, he discerned well, and whatever was tugging at his heart, he's finally been able to receive from God the message of what he's supposed to do, and he's following through. And so there's something joyful about it because he's taking that next step towards his vocation and listening to God.
How has your relationship with your family and with your friends changed over the years that you've been in seminary?
With my immediate family, those relationships changed in regards that there's almost kind of like at least I experienced like a respect from some family members and kind of confusion from others. And so that would make some family members perhaps kind of seek me out and others perhaps kind of grow a bit more distance. And that just kind of happens with pursuing a holy life. Some people are attracted to that. Some people perhaps want to distance themselves away from you.
Yeah.
There's still people who I've known my whole life who now that I've joined seminary think that I'm a totally different person now. So that's real. People, they act like I'm like somehow I got plopped on this planet from another planet. I'm like, I've known you my whole life. I'm the same person. But for the most part, people are very accepting and, in fact, I would say curious. Most people are very curious about, how much time? Oh my gosh, that much time? Oh my gosh. What are you doing now? And so they're very curious about my life and what my next steps are. So it's good, yeah. And it's not what I thought it would be before entering, for sure.
And how has your relationship with the Lord changed over these years in the seminary?
One of the things that I did before seminary is I would go to daily mass and I would stay after daily mass and I would pray. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I'm really good at praying. This is before seminary. I'm really good at praying, like I feel a lot, so that's really good. And then when I went to seminary, I started feeling less in prayer, and I associated that with getting worse at prayer. What I've realized, though, is that through the past 6 years, there are waves in which I experience something that I think I'm like, oh, that's God, I'm feeling something good. And then there's times where I don't feel anything. And what I realize is that God is drawing me in to something deeper.
I would say one of the biggest changes when I came into the seminary, I had this large desire just to please God, but a lot of the desire to please God was like, okay, I have to do this. So it was a lot of like, kind of like self-sufficiency, self-control type of things. There's not a lot of dialogue that can happen there when I'm always seeking to control the way and measure and control the way in which I'm interacting with God. And so a lot of it has been learning to kind of let go of that self-control, that self-sufficiency, and really just allow the Lord, just experience the Lord's love and just His delight in me. And that's been huge.
And in your experience of parish life, what areas inflame your heart?
So parish life is it's been a joy to spend some time now as a seminarian in the parish. People approach me as if I'm already ordained. I know I'm not, but being able to be a witness to Jesus, both in the parish and outside of the walls of the church, has just truly been a joy for me. It's been amazing to see the way that people bear their hearts and how beautiful that is.
As I've had this chance to be at the parish life and experience more, there's been so many different elements that kind of are just so life-giving and so joyful. I think times like visiting the children at the school and just listening to their questions and getting this chance to walk with the people going through RCIA as they themselves are entering into the church, or just so many other elements of the parish life have been so life-giving.
The experience that I find inflames my heart the most is when I get that time to talk with other parishioners and just kind of have like a very heart-to-heart, one-on-one. Perhaps they come to me and they have just a small question, or perhaps there's something going on spiritually, and they have that vulnerability just to share that with me. And just being in that kind of privileged position just to get to even just speak with them.
It's really cool to share with people what I get to experience. And ultimately that comes down to, I get to experience the love of God, and I like to share that experience with people. I think that's like ultimately why we even have the church, why we have priests and all these people, is because we've experienced God's love and we just want everyone to experience that.